The sun baked the asphalt of a lonely stretch of highway, and the only sign of civilization for miles was a place called Lee's Roadside Diner. It was the kind of place that existed between places, a waypoint for travelers and a refuge for locals. And right now, the locals were making their presence known. The rumble started as a distant thunder, a deep, guttural chorus that grew until it shook the very windows of the diner. A dozen Harley-Davidsons, chrome gleaming like sharp teeth, rolled into the gravel lot and fell silent. Their riders, clad in leather vests bearing a patch that read Sons of the Soil, dismounted with a swagger that spoke of territorial ownership. Their leader, a man named Brock, led his crew inside, their entrance a wave of loud voices and creaking leather that smothered the quiet hum of the diner's refrigerator and the muted report from a small television behind the counter. The news was talking about heroes, about a Medal of Valor ceremony at the White House. But Brock wasn't interested. "Turn that garbage off, Lee," he bellowed, sliding into a booth. "We didn't come here for propaganda." That's when the other man walked in. He moved with a quiet, measured grace that stood in stark contrast to the biker's bluster. He was a black man in his 40s, with a calm, weathered face that seemed to hold a deep and private history. He took a seat at the counter, ordered a black coffee and a patty melt, and spoke to the young waitress, Chloe, with a quiet, "Yes, ma'am." His name was Jake, and he was just passing through, heading home. But in a place like this, for a man like him, just passing through was never that simple. The diner's atmosphere shifted. The biker's conversation, once broadly boisterous, began to narrow, its focus settling on the solitary man at the counter like a heat-seeking missile. "You gotta protect what's yours," Brock's voice carried, laced with pointed venom. "Your soil, your people." Jake continued to eat, his back to them, an island of calm in a rising sea of hostility. You could see the discipline in his posture, the way he controlled every movement. He was a man who understood the cost of reaction, but Brock mistook his silence for weakness. He slid out of his booth, his boots thumping on the linoleum floor. "You think you're smart?" he growled, moving closer. "You come into my town, sit in my diner. You're nothing, a stray dog that wandered into the wrong yard." That's when Jake turned. Slowly, the stool creaked under his weight. And when his eyes met Brock's, they weren't filled with fear or anger, but with a profound, unnerving stillness. "This isn't your diner," Jake said, his voice low and steady. "Each were a stone dropped into a pond. It's Lee's, and you don't own the road. And you sure as hell don't own the respect of everyone on it." The confrontation escalated. Brock, fueled by pride and prejudice, leaned in, his face inches from Jake's. "What do you own, huh? You probably never fought for anything. You're just background noise." And in that moment, something in Jake's eyes shifted. A flicker of memory. A ghost of a pain so profound it momentarily eclipsed the present. You could almost hear the echo of it. Distant gunfire, the shouts of men, the chaos of a war he had carried home with him. "You have no idea what I fought for," Jake said, his voice now colder, sharper. Brock scoffed. "How about you get the hell out of our town before we escort you out?" It was then that Jake made his decision. You could see in the way he took a slow, deep breath, a man transitioning from a state of rest to a state of purpose. He stood up. He wasn't a large man, but his presence seemed to expand, commanding the very air in the room. The bikers instinctively retreated a step. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. Brock and his men tensed, expecting a weapon, but what Jake produced was a small, worn, velvet-lined box. He placed it on the Formica counter. The sound was heavy, final. "I don't have a patch," Jake said, his voice resonating with a newfound authority. "I have this." He clicked the box open. Inside, nestled against the velvet, was a star-shaped metal blue and white, hanging from a light blue ribbon. It gleamed under the diner's fluorescent lights. It was the Medal of Valor. A sharp, collective intake of breath filled the room. The bluster drained from Brock's face, replaced by stunned confusion. "It's a fake," he stammered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. And then Jake spoke again, and his words were no longer just a defense, but a testimony. "On a mountainside in Afghanistan," he began, his gaze locked on Brock, "my platoon was ambushed, cut off, outnumbered 3-1. He spoke of calling in artillery, so close it shook the very ground they were dying on. He spoke of carrying 2 wounded men, one on each shoulder, for 700 yards through a hail of enemy fire. The soil I fought for was foreign, he said, his voice thick with memory. But the men I fought for, they were from places just like this. They were white, black, Hispanic, Asian. They were my brothers. I fought for them so that they could see their families again, so that they could stop at a diner for a patty melt on their way home. He gestured to the medal. This is for the 2 men I carried who didn't make it. It's for the families who got a folded flag instead of a hug. This medal is a piece of metal, but it's heavy. You want to know what fighting is? It's the weight of this. The silence in the diner was absolute. The news report on the TV, now perfectly clear, mentioned the name Sergeant First Class Jacob Reynolds. The pieces clicked into place for everyone in the room. The hero the nation was preparing to honor had been sitting in their diner, being called a stray dog. Jake closed the box with a soft, definitive click. He turned, paid his bill with a quiet "thank you" to a tearful Chloe, and walked out. The bikers parted for him, their eyes cast down in shame, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. The door chimed softly behind him. His car started and pulled away, the sound fading into the hum of the highway. Inside, the silence lingered. The mighty sons of the soil were frozen, their worldview shattered against the hard truth of a $12 piece of metal and the immeasurable courage it represented. Brock, his face ashen, stumbled to the window and stared out at the empty road. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a broken whisper. "I have a son. He's a Marine." He turned to his crew, the facade of the tough biker completely gone, revealing a small, ashamed man. What if that had been my boy? What if my boy was one of the 19, and some piece of garbage like me was talking to the man who saved him like that? He looked at the patch on his vest, as if seeing it for the first time. "We're not soldiers," he murmured. "We're a joke." With clumsy fingers, he ripped the vest off and threw it on the table. The sons of the soil patch lay face up, a meaningless symbol on a discarded costume. "I'm done," he said, and walked out alone. The lesson had been delivered not with fists, but with the heavy, silent weight of valor. And long after the last motorcycle had rumbled away, the echo of that lesson remained in the quiet diner, a permanent stain on the conscience, and a testament to the quiet strength of those who carry the heaviest burdens without ever asking for thanks. Call to action. Subscribe for more intense social justice stories and real-world inspired dramas. Like, comment, and share to amplify the fight against racial profiling. Hit the bell for updates on stories that expose injustice and inspire change.